Hey everybody, welcome back to Zees Political Arrow, where we aim straight for the truth, no bullshit, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. Got a question for you all. Can anyone actually stand up for Gaza or Palestine against the might of Israel and its steadfast US support? Or is this the case of David fighting Goliath, with no slingshot in sight? We're diving into an enlightening conversation with Professor John Mearsheimer, who brings some sharp analysis into why Arab states remain silent, how global alliances shift into this power struggle, and whether the youth can shape the future. Spoiler alert, the answer may not be what you think. Let's get into it.
What about Arab states if leaders wanted to actually defend Palestinians and protect their lives at least? What can they do?
The problem is, given the military balance in the region, there's not much that Arab leaders can do. What is Jordan going to do? Declare war against Israel? Come to the rescue of the Palestinians? The fact is that Jordan does not have the military capability to intervene. Furthermore, a country like Jordan, and this is true of Egypt as well, are heavily dependent on American economic aid for their survival. That gives the United States and, in effect, Israel great leverage over both Jordan and Egypt. So there's not much they can do.
Russia is signing a strategic cooperation agreement with Iran, similar to the one they signed with North Korea. They declared that they have a special partnership with China since 2022, the Ukrainian war. How is it going to change or to manifest in the region in the midst of a war?
It's the American threat to those four countries that has forced them to work together. As far as the Middle East is concerned, the two countries that matter greatly for the Middle East are Russia and Iran. And what you see happening is the Russians and the Iranians are now beginning to work together. The United States and Russia are both involved in the Middle East. And the Russians view the United States as a mortal enemy, as they should. The Russians are fighting, in effect, the United States in Ukraine. So the Russians want to help the Iranians, and I believe they are now helping the Iranians. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens if Iran decides to develop nuclear weapons. If Iran begins to go down the nuclear road, will Russia resist? And will Russia say, no, you cannot do that? That has been the case in the past. You want to remember that the Russians played a key role in putting together the JCPOA. That was the arms control agreement involving Iran that slowed down the Iranian nuclear program.
You simplify your main theory on your website by explaining, and I quote, "I am a realist, which means that I believe that the great powers dominate the international system and they constantly engage in security competition with each other, which sometimes leads to war. You come from the greatest power, which sometimes makes its war in my region. I come from this region where most of the wars mostly happen. Is it the fate of my people in my region? How can we change that?"
The Middle East is not going to be a peaceful region for a long time to come. 8 days before October 7th, Jake Sullivan, who was the national security advisor for President Biden, said he had not seen the Middle East so peaceful.
Let's take a breather right here. Isn't it wild how the statement feels less like an analysis and more like a weather forecast? Today's outlook: turbulence with no chance of peace. The Middle East is stuck in a cycle of conflict one after another. Often seems like a global punching bag for power plays. So here's a thought. If regional leaders and external powers continue fueling instability, is peace even possible? Or are we just setting the stage for more eruption? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And while you're here, if this breakdown gives you food for thought, why not subscribe? This channel is all about cutting through the noise and exposing the raw truth, something the mainstream media won't give you. All right, let's get back into it.
But what he didn't understand was sitting underneath the surface were these powerful volcanic forces that were just waiting to erupt. And of course, they began to erupt on October 7th. And we've had a series of eruptions since October 7th.
What about the youth? They seem to have higher standards than us, higher moral values than us, and a greater sense of justice. Do you see that they're going to change the world?
I think there's no question when you look at young people today, They're much more attuned to human rights. They're much more attuned to sort of doing the right thing from a moral point of view. It's no accident that when you look at what's been happening in the West in terms of protests against Israeli policy in Gaza, that young people have been leading those protests, and there's much more dissatisfaction, much more anger with Israel among young people in the West than there is with older people. The problem is that older people control the policy-making positions, and it'll be a long time before those young people become policymakers. In the West, it's not clear that public opinion matters very much for how policymakers operate. You want to understand, if public opinion in the West governed how Western leaders dealt with Israel over Gaza and over the West Bank, we would have a fundamentally different policy. But up at the elite level, the elites remain almost 100% committed to supporting Israel no matter what.
Is the U.S. playing the colonial, imperialistic supremacy, that overprotective helicopter parent to Israel, spoiling it with unconditional support no matter how much trouble it stirs up, to the Middle East being stuck in its own version of Groundhog Day, where peace is always promised but somehow never shows up? But here's the kicker. Imagine the Middle East has a neighborhood potluck. The U.S. shows up, flips everyone's table, and then tells the crowd, relax, we're bringing stability. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is left picking up the pieces, or just staring at the chaos, wondering who invented them in the first place. Here's the big question I'll leave you with. Are we on the brink of a massive shift, or will it be business as usual, with the same players, same conflict, and the same excuses? Trust me, the next episode, we'll dive into some of those under-the-radar moves that could completely rewrite the script. This is your host, Z, with the Arrow, so keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep asking. Until the next one, see you there.